9 experienced hikers, middle of winter, remote Soviet mountains. And a decision so irrational it still doesn't make sense 65 years later. February 1959, Igor Dyatlov led 8 other hikers into the northern Ural mountains of Russia. They were not reckless thrill seekers, they were trained, disciplined. Certified in advanced winter survival, several were engineering students, logical thinkers, methodical planners. They had completed difficult expeditions before. They understood snowpack, wind patterns, avalanche risks, hypothermia timelines. They carried proper equipment, heavy wool layers, military-grade boots, axes, compasses, cameras, diaries, enough food for weeks. They mapped their route carefully. They notified authorities of their return date. They were expected back on a specific day. If they were delayed, search teams would know exactly where to look. This trip was meant to qualify them for the highest level of hiking certification. They were confident. Their destination was a mountain known locally as Kholat Syakhl. Translated, it means Mountain of the Dead. Even locals avoided it. On February 1st, the group made a choice that would later be questioned by experts for decades. Instead of descending into the protection of the tree line, they pitched their tent high on the exposed slope. The wind tore across the ridge. Temperatures dropped below -30 degrees. Snow moved like smoke across the mountain. Visibility shrank. Still, they cooked. They joked. They wrote journal entries. They took photographs. The final images show them smiling, relaxed, calm. Nothing appears wrong. No visible panic, no sign of fear. That night, something changed. When the hikers failed to return on schedule, search teams began to worry. Days passed, then weeks. Snow continued to fall. When rescuers finally reached the last known coordinates of the group, what they found made no sense. The tent was still standing, partially collapsed under snow but upright. It had not been flattened, it had not been swept away, but it had been cut open. From the inside, not one clean exit, multiple slashes low across the fabric near the base, as if several people were trying to escape at once. Their boots were still inside, heavy winter coats. Gloves, food, money, maps, personal journals, everything required to survive in deadly cold conditions, left behind. Outside the tent, investigators discovered something even stranger. 9 sets of footprints. Some barefoot, some in socks. A few wearing only a single boot. The prints led away from the tent, down the slope, toward the forest nearly a mile away. Investigators later noted something unsettling. The footprints did not show signs of running. They were not scattered. They were not chaotic. They were measured, deliberate, evenly spaced, as if whatever happened inside that tent did not trigger blind panic, but forced a calculated escape. No drag marks were found. No broken bones near the campsite. No signs of violence around the tent itself. The snow near the entrance was not disturbed by a struggle. It was as if they made a decision together. To leave, immediately, into conditions they fully understood could kill them within minutes. These were not inexperienced hikers. They knew exposure at that temperature meant death in under an hour. They knew frostbite could disable them quickly, and yet they stepped out anyway. What could make 9 trained survivalists cut their way out of safety and walk calmly into a Siberian winter? Part 2 changes everything. When search teams followed the footprints into the forest, they found the first 2 bodies beneath a towering cedar tree. The branches above were broken, as if someone had tried to climb. Below them was the faint outline of a small fire. The 2 hikers were barefoot, dressed only in underwear. Their hands were burned, likely from feeding branches into the flames. They had tried to survive. They had tried to stay warm long enough to think, but hypothermia had taken them. A few hundred yards uphill between the tree line and the tent, 3 more bodies were discovered. One of them was Igor Dyatlov himself. They were positioned as if moving, not wandering, not scattered, moving uphill, toward the tent, toward the gear they had abandoned. Their bodies suggested something chilling. They were crawling, as if they had realized too late that leaving shelter had been a fatal mistake. 5 hikers were now accounted for. All officially dead from hypothermia, tragic, but understandable. Then spring arrived. As snow began to melt, searchers continued probing the surrounding terrain. 2 months after the first discovery, the final 4 hikers were located in a ravine nearly 75 meters deeper into the forest. They were buried beneath more than 15 feet of snow. And what investigators found changed everything. These four had not simply frozen. They had suffered catastrophic internal injuries. One had a crushed skull, another had massive chest fractures. Doctors later stated the force required to cause those injuries was comparable to being struck by a car at high speed. Yet their skin showed almost no external trauma, no defensive wounds, no cuts, no bruises matching the internal damage. It was as if an invisible force had struck them. One of the hikers, Lyudmila Dubinina, was missing her tongue. Soft tissue from her face was also gone. Two others were missing their eyes. Soviet officials initially documented these findings without clear explanation. Later, some experts would argue that scavenging animals and natural decomposition in running water could account for missing soft tissue. But at the time, the details fueled something darker. Adding to the confusion, several pieces of clothing tested positive for radiation. Not enough to cause immediate alarm, but enough to raise questions. Why would hikers in the remote Ural mountains carry radioactive contamination? Some suggested prior work in industrial environments. Others speculated about military testing in the region. And there were reports, never fully verified, of glowing orange spheres in the sky that night. Witnesses miles away claimed to have seen them. Soviet authorities conducted an official investigation. It was brief. It concluded that the hikers died due to what was described only as a compelling natural force. No further explanation was given. The case was sealed. Decades passed. The mystery refused to fade. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation. Their modern conclusion: an avalanche. Specifically, a rare type of slab avalanche triggered by wind accumulation on the slope. It sounded logical until experts pushed back. The incline where the tent was pitched was relatively mild. The tent itself was not fully buried when found. The footprints leaving the campsite were orderly and preserved. In a true avalanche scenario, chaos would be expected. Broken bones near the tent, equipment scattered, signs of violent displacement. Instead, investigators saw something unsettling. 9 sets of controlled footprints, leaving calmly. No other tracks nearby, no signs of outside attackers, no confirmed evidence of military involvement, no definitive proof of avalanche impact. Just a group decision that defied survival instinct. 9 trained hikers, 1 tent, 1 night. They cut their way out from inside. They walked into a Siberian winter. 5 froze. 4 suffered injuries still debated by experts, and no single theory explains every detail. Not avalanche, not military testing, not animal attack, not group panic. 65 years later, the Dyatlov Pass Incident remains frozen in time. A case where the environment was brutal, but the behavior was stranger than the weather. They left warmth, they left safety. And whatever happened in that tent that night was powerful enough to make 9 experienced survivalists choose the cold. So what happened after the lights went out?